is today ever gonna be a doozy of one? Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you have seen on social media the recent influx of brand new, baby witches and stuff, and people who are starting to come into neo-paganism and just, new forms of witchcraft. And generally speaking, that's always amazing to me. I'm always so happy to welcome new witches into the craft. I'm always so happy to welcome new pagans into the pagan community. And we're very lucky that this uptick in people who are interested in witchcraft and in paganism is happening when we live in a technological age where your phone has a more powerful computer than maybe even your desktop at work, an age where if you have a question, all you have to do is ask Google and you immediately have the answer. But as I've mentioned in previous videos before, there is the double-edged sword to technology, which is there is just as much misinformation out there as there is true information that is actually beneficial to you. And unfortunately, when it comes to things like neo-paganism and witchcraft, that can really run rampant because, especially from the paganism side of this discussion, there isn't a ton that we know anymore. That's why they call it neo-paganism, new paganism, because it's a new take on an old practice. We don't 100% know what our ancestors were doing necessarily, because a lot of the practice, a lot of the culture, a lot of the paintings and anything that was documented or recorded in any way is lost to time. It was destroyed from different crusades and a lot of old Christians because they didn't want it around. They wanted no sign of it. They didn't want anyone to be practicing it anymore, so they got rid of it. And so we have to just kind of rely on what family members and friends say their grandparents did, that their grandparents did, and so on down the line. And it can get really muddled sometimes. It can get muddled because it's like a game of telephone. Each person is going to interpret what their elders said a different way. You could sit me in a room with somebody else listening to the same elders speaking about the pagan practices of their family, and because we are two different people who interpret information in different ways, we might take what this elder says completely differently. I might practice whatever they say in a totally different way from the other person in the room with me, because that's just human nature. We just interpret things differently from each other. And on top of that, you also have people who decide, okay, I like some of these old practices, but let's kind of reinvent it for today's society. Things like tech witches, if you've heard of that. It's people who practice their witchcraft online or with technology. They have like a grimoire that's in their phone or something. And again, absolutely nothing wrong whatsoever with updating old practices and making them more practical for a modern audience. The problem arises when you have people who are like, okay, I am deciding I'm going to update something, or I'm going to create a brand new practice around this certain deity or that certain creature, but they don't do their proper research. They end up creating something, a practice that can actually harm people, and then a bunch of people follow suit, which is what's happening right now. I don't know how far outside of the pagan community this has gotten yet, but for whatever bizarre reason on social media, especially on Tumblr and TikTok, who's really surprised by that? I've seen this big upswing in people who are claiming that they have either had sex with an ancient deity or they've married it. Now, deity to practitioner marriage is not a brand new thing. It is something that has existed for a while, and it doesn't always mean what you think it means. It can simply mean that you are pledging your life, your devotion, and your worship to that deity, and it's considered a quote marriage. because it's similar to what you pledged. That is who you will devote your practice to from now on, and that is fine. However, that is not what everyone is saying anymore. They are looking into deities, especially ones that are becoming more influential in pop culture, ones like Loki, but mostly the Marvel one, of course, and not the actual Loki. Ones like Hades. It's fun to put deities in pop culture. It's nice to see people becoming interested in them again and wanting to worship them again, but the problem is people are taking it at face value. They're saying, I just like the way that this character has been created. I think they're fun. I think they're cute. I think they're, attractive or whatever. And they're treating the deity like they would treat a human boyfriend, girlfriend, what have you, partner. And the fact is, you just can't do that. The deity is not going to respond to you and your advances the way that a human being necessarily would. They are very high above you. They've always been very high above you, and they always will be very high above you. They're not interested in just fraternizing with you for no reason. They will generally not work with you if you have nothing to offer them in return. And you need to understand what you're pledging. This is a creature or a spirit or whatever you want to consider it that has existed for centuries. It is ancient, it is wise, and it is powerful. If you pledge something to it in a moment of weakness because you're just going gaga over the character representation of this deity and you decide that you're going to legitimately try to, they could take that a lot more literally than you mean it. And if a few years down the road you decide you're no longer interested in that deity, maybe you've discovered some aspects of it that you're not very keen on, or you realize that there's a different deity in your life that you want to work with, and this old deity that you got married to completely hates that deity, that's when this can get dangerous and it can really blow up in your face. And then moving on to the I had sex with a god thing. Where in the world is this even coming from, honestly? It's just silly because it can't actually really happen. They don't have a physical body. They don't have a physical form. Yes, they can manifest in the form of signs. They could come to you in the form of an animal. They could come to you in your mind's eye when you are meditating. They could come to you in a dream or something. They could even be standing in front of you right now and having some kind of conversation with you. But they don't have a physical body. They don't have the same anatomy a human being does. They can create new deities, similarly to how a human can produce offspring and more human beings, but they can't have sex with you in the human sense. And why in the world would they want to? Again, this isn't to just outright insult anyone, but they've got a plethora of other deities and mythological creatures to choose from that are very similar in power level to themselves. That would be much more appealing to a creature like that than one of us. And on top of it, again, just like the deity marriage thing, this kind of, glamorizing of I had sex with a deity can be extremely harmful to newcomers of paganism or witchcraft, because you're painting in this very romantic light, like, oh, I pledged my devotion to, I don't know, Hecate or something, so she slept with me last night. And then people are gonna be like, wow, that's beautiful, that's romantic, that sounds like, the next new young adult series or something that's gonna be a big hit. It sounds glamorous, but it isn't. If, for the sake of argument, devil's advocate here, if you achieved such a strong bond with a god that they were willing to sleep with you similarly in a manner that a human would sleep with you, you must have pledged a great deal to that god, and it wasn't just an offering and it wasn't just service. You probably pledged quite a bit to them that you can never get back now. You are bound to them potentially forever. A lot of people are not going to read into it that way. They're not going to understand the severity of what you've done. They're going to see it as being like Twilight or something, thinking it's cute and romantic and stuff, and they're going to want it for themselves, and people are going to get hurt. So I think that I'm never going to say that someone, isn't allowed to talk about a part of their craft or their worship. I don't think I have the authority to do something like that. But I do think that we need to be a little more dual-sided when we discuss matters like this in the future. If you're going to discuss something on your platform like marriage to a deity or anything vaguely romantic with a deity, you better be telling them the dangers of these things as well as the benefits, or we're going to end up with an entire generation of witches and pagans who are practicing in a way that harms themselves and harms their environment and the world around them. But that's pretty much all I've got for today. It's been weird. But until next time, do something that makes you happy today, no matter what anyone else thinks about it. And I'll see all of you again soon. Bye-bye.